When Richard Thompson turned 70, he believed he had seen it all. He had raised 3 children, buried the love of his life, fought cancer twice, and survived a heart attack. Yet nothing prepared him for the kind of people he would have to avoid in his old age. Not strangers, not criminals, not scammers on the street, but people within his own home, people with his last name. It all began on a rainy Thursday afternoon in suburban Illinois. Richard had just returned home from his regular cardiology appointment, clutching a plastic bag with new prescriptions. His doctor warned him once again to avoid stress and get plenty of rest. But as he stepped into the foyer of his home, he heard raised voices. His daughter Amanda was arguing with his oldest son Jacob. They didn't notice him at first. Amanda, the youngest at 32, had temporarily moved back in after her divorce. Jacob, a corporate lawyer, was visiting from Chicago for the weekend. The topic of their heated discussion: Richard's house and the assets in his name. "We need to be practical, Amanda," Jacob said. "Dad's not getting any younger. This house is falling apart. We should consider selling it and putting him in assisted living." Amanda scoffed. "Easy for you to say. You haven't been around. I've been the one helping him, making his meals, running errands. If anyone deserves something out of this, it's me." Richard cleared his throat, making his presence known. They turned, faces stiffening into forced smiles. "Hey, Dad," Amanda chirped too sweetly, walking over and taking his bag. "You should be resting." Richard knew then and there, this was not about love or care. This was about control. And worse, entitlement. Over the next few weeks, he started observing more clearly. Amanda's assistance came with guilt trips and subtle manipulations. She would leave bills on the counter with passive-aggressive notes like, "I guess I'll cover it again," or remind him at dinner how she had given up everything for him. One morning, Richard overheard her on the phone with a friend, complaining, "If I can just get him to sign the power of attorney, everything will be easier. I mean, he barely reads what he signs anyway." That night, Richard lay awake, heart pounding. He wasn't angry, he was disappointed. The daughter he had cuddled to sleep, taught to ride a bike, and comforted through heartbreaks was now plotting to override his autonomy. Jacob, on the other hand, was more subtle. He would bring legal documents under the guise of planning for the future, and act as though he were doing Richard a favor. "Just sign here," he would say, not even offering to read the document aloud. Richard, having once worked as a high school principal, still had a sharp mind and knew better. He politely refused each time. He found solace in weekly lunches with his neighbor Jim, a retired veteran with a love for fishing and old country music. They often talked about their kids, comparing stories and disappointments. One day, Richard finally confided, "I never thought the people I'd have to protect myself from in old age would be my own children." Jim sighed. "Same here, buddy. My son tried to convince me to refinance my house under his name. Said it was for tax purposes. You gotta keep your eyes open, even for family." Things escalated when Amanda secretly invited a real estate agent to evaluate the house. Richard walked in from the backyard to find a stranger measuring his living room. "This is Mr. Collins," Amanda said too cheerfully. "He's just here to give us an idea of what the market looks like." "Us?" Richard repeated. "This house isn't on the market. Not now, not ever. Not unless I say so." Amanda's face turned red, but she didn't argue. Mr. Collins awkwardly packed up and left. That night, Amanda slammed doors and refused to talk to Richard. Her sulking lasted for days. Still, Richard held firm. This was his home. It was where he had celebrated birthdays, grieved his wife, built a life. He wasn't going to be bullied into selling it. A week later, Richard received a call from his youngest son, Eric, a schoolteacher in Denver. Of the 3 kids, Eric was the only one who visited without asking for anything. He didn't have much, but he never complained. Richard trusted him most. They talked for over an hour about old movies, baseball, and the madness going on with Amanda and Jacob. Eric's voice softened near the end of the call. Dad, don't let them pressure you. If they're making life hard, say the word. I'll fly in and help you set boundaries. Richard appreciated that. He wasn't helpless, just weary. The hardest part of aging wasn't the medications or the bad knees. It was realizing that some of the people you loved the most were no longer safe for your peace of mind. One morning he made a decision. He visited a lawyer, one he chose independently, and created a living will. He updated his power of attorney, appointing Eric as his medical and financial proxy. He divided his estate evenly, but with clear instructions that no major decisions could be made while he was still alive without his signed consent. Amanda was furious. I'm the one who's been here for you. What has Eric done? He calls once a month. Richard's voice was calm but firm. Eric respects me. He doesn't try to manipulate or guilt me. That's the kind of support I need. She left the house that day, slamming the door behind her. Richard sat down in his recliner, sipping lukewarm coffee, and felt something unusual, peace. The kind of peace that comes when you take your power back. Over time, Richard started reconnecting with friends he had lost touch with. He joined a local seniors book club and even took up painting. The joy returned to his life, bit by bit. Amanda still called occasionally, usually when she needed something. Jacob didn't come around as often anymore. But Eric visited every few months, and they'd sit on the porch talking about life, music, and how strange aging could be. One chilly October evening, Richard attended a town meeting on elder abuse. He sat quietly in the back, listening to stories of neglect, manipulation, and stolen dignity. When the speaker asked if anyone wanted to share, Richard stood slowly and walked to the front. My name is Richard Thompson. I'm 72 years old. I raised 3 children, paid off a mortgage, buried a wife, and lived through more than I care to list. But the hardest lesson I've learned in old age is that sometimes, the people you love the most are the ones you must be wary of. I'm not saying abandon your family. I'm saying protect yourself. Financially, emotionally, mentally. Love doesn't excuse manipulation. Help doesn't justify control. Old age doesn't mean surrendering your rights. It means living your truth, on your terms. The room fell silent. Then came the applause. It wasn't the loud kind, but it was real. People came up to him afterward, some with tears, others with hugs. They shared their own stories. One woman said her niece drained her bank account. A man confessed he hadn't seen his grandchildren in years because he refused to sell his house to his daughter. Richard felt less alone. He wasn't just protecting himself anymore. He was helping others see they had that right too. Years later, when Richard passed peacefully in his sleep, Eric fulfilled his father's wishes exactly as outlined. Amanda and Jacob showed up at the funeral, quieter than usual. There was no arguing about the will, no dramatic scenes. Richard had tied every loose end. But more importantly, he had lived his last chapter in dignity.